Hi, my name is Paige, and I am the founder of Sunrise Flora, a women's health hub and women's health space. Specifically, here we focus on connecting to our cycles, and that is our lunar cycle and our circadian rhythm. So, I'm on here today to talk about who I am and what I do and why I do what I do. So, today I was actually asked by my friend's mother how I became a health coach in terms of what qualifications I have. And she asked if I had certifications or how, if do you have to get certified to do this? And I felt pulled a little in the way of the feeling the imposter. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't. But as I've been thinking about it and I kind of sat with myself, I realized that up until this point, I in more in recent times, I felt like I finally came to this place where I've embodied everything that I've been practicing over the past 3.5 years when I began this journey into deep, energetic, and sacred connection to my womb, myself as a woman, and as a person in this world, and as someone who wants to hold space for other women. In terms of my cyclical health, in terms of charting my cycle, I've been charting since before I had kids. My first child was born, whoa, 6.5 years ago. So I've been charting since before that. And 3.5 years ago, my husband and I were having a hard time conceiving our second daughter. We had lost our first son, and that was the baby I had been charting before I got pregnant with him. Was very intensely charting after we had lost him. Um, and about 3.5 years ago, I learned that trauma could be held in your womb. So at that point, I started processing the trauma of his loss and feeling the grief that I had been holding for at that time 3 years that I hadn't really processed, that had kind of been let out in little ways, but not an intentional grieving space. So I began to do so, and I started with my womb. I cast circles around myself. I sat with myself. I held my womb. I learned about rituals with your sacred blood. And I did all of these different practices that I learned about. And what happened was I felt the weight shed. I started being awakened to memories. You can hear my kids. I started being awakened to these memories of traumas to my womb space that I had experienced before having lost my son and started processing through those things. And lo and behold, we got pregnant with my daughter, Nora, and I now have two wonderful, super rad daughters. Um, but continuing in terms of my path and my practice. So I went from very scientific, very physical based tracking to then stepping into the space of energetic tracking, spiritual tracking, emotional tracking, learning what happens during different parts of my cycle, how I can connect to those to heal, and very specifically also learning that connecting to our ancient ancestors through our womb, through our bloodshed, and how you can heal not just your line that you've experienced in this timeline, but the past of the women in your line and how that flows forward into your children. And so this work has been learned through very self-led, so through books, blogs, online mentors, podcasts that I've listened to, and then my lived practice, what I have embodied in myself as someone who going down this practice was very focused on the logical of like what is like logically happening to me, what is scientifically happening to me in these spaces in terms of my brain. How is my brain processing trauma? How is my body processing trauma? I kind of started just flowing through all these spaces logically and then got a very big kick to start embodying these and learning about embodiment. And I actually learned that from a wonderful woman, Usha Nandi. She is the founder of Women Wellness. Are you guys okay? Okay, one of my kids kicked my other kid, so I had to go handle. I am back. So, my one of my biggest mentors has been Usha Nandi, like I was saying, from Women Wellness. She's the founder. She doesn't know that she's my main mentor, but I've taken and watched every single one of her free offerings that she has had. I learned so much. I gained so much insight into the science and into the energy and into the sacredness of our wombs. And I plan on taking her womb circle facilitator course next spring. And so I can deepen into my knowledge. But up until this time, I have learned so much through her. And then in just terms of living the experience that I have lived and going from someone who was caught up in these ancient, excuse me, anxious cycles. I had so much grief in my body and hadn't let any of it out. I was always told I was too emotional, and so and the reason was because all my emotions were like pouring out the top instead of being felt and processed and discussed like they needed to be. Um, and so when I'm here, what I'm saying, oh goodness, what I'm saying is, so much of my qualifications is going from a woman that was stuck in grief, that was stuck in an, an, anxious cycles. Jeez Louise. And that was someone who genuinely, when I used to look in the mirror, I hated the woman I saw, the physical form. And to be honest, looking back, I don't even think that I really saw someone behind the physical. I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what was beneath and what was inside. And what if I did even see that, I hated that person. And at 28, 3.5 years ago, I started to learn so much more about who I was because I decided I wanted to be more for my daughter. I wanted to be someone who they could look up to, someone who had a fierce strength, a fierce love. And what happened along the way of trying to be better for my first daughter was the one who initiated this for me. What happened when I decided to be better for her was I found this incredible woman buried underneath trauma, buried underneath grief, buried underneath anger. And as I began to learn the sacredness of feeling our emotions, the sacredness of emotions in themselves, and the sacredness of what my path was supposed to be here, I really just discovered myself and discovered what I valued. And as I began to hold space for women, I started with my friend, and she came to visit me, and I held a 7 day chakra connection retreat for her, and we sat together in ceremony every day for quite some time every day and processed through each chakra from the root north up to the crown. And what I saw in her was what I had been seeing in myself and what I was craving for every woman I came into contact with. And it was watching her come to meet me in a frantic, anxiety ridden, frazzled space and leaving grounded, joyful, having watched her shed and experience and discuss things that she had experienced. She she transformed. It was one of the wildest things that I had ever seen to watch someone go from point A to point B in 7 days. She's a magical woman, and but aren't we all? And so the reason I bring that up is I started with that. So I started with this one moment, and into that became just being a good friend, learning how to hold space, learning how to be an active listener, learning how to reflect someone's story back to them, and give them the sort of space that they needed to discover what they already knew within themselves. I began holding women's circles when we were living in Arizona, and the women continued the circle and shifted it into what it needed to be for them when I had left. I started another circle here in San Diego, and my friend took it over, and she has now shifted it into what it needed to be for her and the women in her circle. And I am going to continue holding these spaces and these circles and set these ripples off so that women can learn their own wisdom through themselves while also learning from these wonderful, wise women sitting in circle with them. Um, in my work that I do, I also create my own practices. Being someone who didn't grow up with the sacred feminine traditions, I've been recreating them for myself and for others through other traditions. So, through somatic work, through energy work, through different spiritualities, through nature based, mostly spiritualities. And I have found ways to kind of put those together while also sprinkling in a lot of mindset work, motivation, inspiration, because that's what I love. And really creating these unique practices that I have used for myself when I couldn't find something online that felt just right. And giving women the space to create their own by just handing them a couple ingredients and letting them mix it how they need to mix it. The spaces that I hold are rooted in grace and responsibility, and to me, that is embodying the feminine and masculine within us, the lunar and the sun within us, circadian lunar rhythms, both of them, and being in touch with this space where we can be gentle with ourselves, but also take control of what we need to take control of, and know when to surrender to what we don't have control of. I value playful magic and grounded practicality. I value love, self trust, and the power of sisterhood. Community has been so integral to my healing, being able to have a mirror of a woman sitting in front of you. I really feel like that's the moon within us, is that reflection as we can speak and a woman will just look at you and be able to hold the kind of ground for you to really allow yourself to wash back over you and process through whatever you're speaking, whether it's to release or to celebrate on and everything in between. And so that's what I wanted to share is I'm not a classically trained woman in any of the work that I do yet. I've taken a few classes here and there, and I've really just had this very unique experience of processing everything, or excuse me, of learning and knowledge that has allowed me to come into this space and hold the kind of space for women where real work can be done, real transformation, real embodiment, and going from point A to point B of who you want to be. This is who I am. This is who I want to embody. And I am here to help you bridge that gap, to learn what is in between to get to the spaces you want to get to. So, welcome to Sunrise and Flora, where we process through things, we work through our lives, we're celebrating each other, and we embody both our circadian and lunar rhythms and learn what that means for us as a unique being and us as women, as a magical species. Um, Thanks, and I hope you have a wonderfully magical day.